The market tunnels of Erevos-9 always smelled of iron dust and stale oxygen. Evan Cole had worked these corridors since he was old enough to lift a welding torch. He knew every flickering light, every corroded pipe that hissed recycled air, every trader's voice echoing through the cavernous space. But today felt different. The gravity stabilizers were glitching again, tugging at his boots with an unsteady rhythm. People grumbled as crates rattled and merchants cursed the colony's maintenance crews. Evan adjusted the strap of his tool satchel, weaving his way through the crowd, when he noticed her. An elderly alien woman, thin as wires and wrapped in shimmering fabric, struggling with a crate far too heavy for her bent frame. Her species, the Olyari, were known for their delicate silver tendrils of hair and faintly glowing skin. She shouldn't have been carrying that load alone. The stabilizers hiccuped. A sudden lurch of gravity sent her stumbling. She cried out, a sound both human and not, as the crate crashed down, pinning her leg against the cold floor. For a moment, the crowd simply watched. Some turned away. Others muttered, "Not our problem," under their breath. Humans and Olyari had lived together on Erevos-9 for decades, but trust was brittle, like the ice that formed on the airlocks in deep winter. Evan didn't hesitate. He dropped his satchel and rushed forward. "Hang on, ma'am," he said, bracing himself against the fluctuating pull of gravity. His arms strained as he lifted the crate just enough to drag her leg free. She gasped in pain, a pale blue liquid seeping from a deep gash along her shin. Olyari blood. "Don't move," Evan said, already digging into his satchel. He pulled out a roll of sealant bandage, standard kit for welders who often burned or cut themselves. With careful hands, he wrapped the glowing wound. The bandage hissed as it fused with her skin, sealing the injury. Her wide, luminous eyes locked onto his. They were full of shock and something deeper. Gratitude. "Why?" she whispered in accented standard. "Because you're hurt," Evan replied simply. Around them, the market had gone silent. Dozens of eyes, human and Olyari, watched. Whispers spread like fire in dry grass, a human helping one of them. A gesture too rare, too dangerous in this climate of suspicion. Evan ignored them. He helped the old woman sit against the wall, steadying her trembling hands. "Can you walk?" he asked gently. She tested her leg and winced. "Perhaps, with aid. Then lean on me." He pulled her arm across his shoulder, lifting her slowly to her feet. The crowd parted reluctantly as he guided her away from the spilled crate. No one offered help. No one spoke, but their eyes followed. As he settled her onto a bench near a flickering light panel, a small drone buzzed overhead, its lens focusing briefly before darting off into the shadows. Evan didn't notice. By the time Evan returned to his quarters later that night, exhaustion pulled at him. His tiny hab room smelled of machine oil and recycled air. He collapsed onto the narrow bunk, boots still on. But sleep didn't come. The image of the old woman's face lingered. The fragility in her voice. The way the crowd had just watched. Did I just paint a target on my back? He wondered. On Erevos-9, humans and Olyari worked side by side in the mines, but tensions ran high. Accidents had been piling up. Equipment failures, cave-ins, unexplained deaths. Rumors whispered that the Olyari sabotaged human sections. Others swore the humans were trying to push the Olyari off the colony. Nobody trusted anybody. And now Evan had chosen a side, at least in the eyes of the colony. The next morning, his suspicions proved right. As Evan walked into the mess hall for breakfast, conversations dipped. People glanced at him, then looked away too quickly. At one table, a group of miners laughed loudly, too loudly. One of them muttered just loud enough for Evan to hear. "Looks like Cole's gone soft for the glowskins." Evan clenched his jaw but said nothing. He grabbed a tray, the tasteless nutrient cubes and recycled water sloshing onto the metal surface. He forced himself to eat, every bite heavier than the last. By the time his shift began in the southern shaft, the whispers had spread further. Marco, a broad-shouldered welder with a scar across his forehead, pulled him aside. "What the hell were you thinking yesterday?" Evan frowned. "What do you mean?" "You know what I mean." "Helping her. In public? Everyone saw. There's feeds circulating already. Drones caught the whole thing. You're a story now, Cole." Evan's stomach dropped. "A story?" "Yeah. Human mechanic plays nursemaid to an Olyari granny. Some say you're just stupid. Others say you're a traitor. Either way, eyes are on you." Marco shook his head. "This colony doesn't forgive easy." Before Evan could reply, alarms blared through the shaft. A booming voice echoed from the intercom. "A cave-in reported in Section 7. Emergency crews respond immediately." The men dropped their tools and sprinted. Evan's heart hammered as dust rained from the ceiling. Another accident. Another tragedy. But deep down, he wondered, was it really an accident at all? Evan and Marco reached Section 7 to find chaos. The tunnel roof had collapsed, pinning several miners beneath jagged slabs of rock. Oxygen alarms screamed as dust clogged the filters. Humans and Olyari shouted at each other in panic. "Get this beam off him!" someone yelled. Evan didn't hesitate. He wedged his pry bar under a fallen support and heaved with everything he had. Marco joined, grunting, until the beam rolled just enough for trapped hands to be pulled free. But as Evan helped a dazed Olyari worker to his feet, angry voices rose behind him. "This wouldn't have happened if they weren't here," a human miner shouted, pointing at the Olyari. "Lies!" an Olyari snapped back. "Your machines are the ones that fail." Shoving, yelling, dust and fear mixing into violence. Evan stood between them, chest heaving. "Enough! We've got people dying under this rubble. You want to fight, do it after they're safe." His voice carried the weight of command, born not of authority, but urgency. Slowly, grudgingly, the workers returned to digging, pulling survivors from the wreckage. But as they worked, Evan noticed something strange. One of the collapsed supports wasn't bent or broken. It had been cut. The edges were too clean, too deliberate. Sabotage. And as that realization sank in, a chilling thought followed. The cave-in, the accidents, the tensions. Someone wants us to tear each other apart. Evan's gaze flicked to the dust-clogged tunnel beyond, where shadows writhed in the half-light. Someone was watching. That night, as he patched the cuts on his hands, a chime at his door startled him. He opened it to find the elderly Olyari woman standing there, leaning on a cane. Her leg was still wrapped in his bandage. "I had to thank you again," she said softly, her glowing eyes searching his. "And to warn you. Helping me has placed you in great danger. The colony is not as it seems." Evan stared at her, unease prickling his skin. "Who are you?" Her lips curved in a sad smile. "Someone who has lived long enough to know that small kindnesses can change the fate of worlds." Before Evan could speak, a drone buzzed past the open door, its lens focusing on them for a brief second before vanishing down the corridor. Evan's blood ran cold, and in that moment, he realized yesterday's simple act of kindness had already set into motion something far greater, and far more dangerous than he could have imagined. The drones were faded into the metallic hum of the corridor, but its presence lingered like smoke in Evan's mind. He shut the door quickly, locking it twice before facing the old woman again. "Sit," he said, motioning toward the bunk. His voice came out harsher than intended. "If you're going to warn me, then tell me everything." The alien lowered herself with dignity, though her cane trembled in her hands. Her glowing eyes swept the cramped room, pausing on the patched cracks in the walls, the single dented mug on the counter, the life of a man who had chosen solitude over alliances. "My name is Sailari," she said at last. "I was once a caretaker of archives, long before your kind settled here. I know what lurks in the shadows of this colony." Evan crossed his arms. "And what exactly is that?" Her gaze hardened. "Saboteurs, not merely disgruntled miners or angry mobs. There are forces at work that wish to see this colony collapse, literally and politically. They are playing both our peoples against each other, whispering lies, staging accidents. Yesterday's cave-in was no accident." Evan stiffened. "I saw the cut supports." Sayalari inclined her head, satisfied. "Then you understand. But what you may not realize is that by helping me, by making a choice of compassion in public, you've marked yourself. They will see you as a threat." Evan dragged a hand down his face, groaning. "Great. Just what I needed. So what am I supposed to do? Pretend it never happened?" "You cannot," Sailari said simply. "The eyes of both humans and Olyari are upon you. You may despise the attention, but it's a weapon. Use it, or be destroyed by it." Evan paced, the weight of her words pressing like the asteroid's gravity. He was a welder, not a politician, not a leader. Yet he thought of the men pinned under the rubble, the way anger had nearly cost more lives. Someone had to stop this spiral. A knock rattled the door, loud, urgent. Evan and Sailari exchanged a sharp glance. He grabbed a wrench from his satchel, an improvised weapon, and approached cautiously. "Cole!" a voice barked. Male, familiar. "Open up." Now, it was Marco. Evan exhaled, relief flooding him as he unlocked the door. Marco shoved his way inside, his broad frame tense with fury. "Are you insane?" Marco hissed. "Words all over the colony, videos of you carrying her, patching her up, now spotted bringing her into your quarters? People are saying you've defected. They're calling you Glow sympathizer." "Do you know what that means?" Evan bristled. "It means I didn't let someone bleed out in the market like garbage." Marco slammed a hand against the wall, rattling the thin metal. "It means you've painted a target on both of us. They'll drag you before the council. Maybe worse." Before Evan could reply, Sailari rose slowly, leaning on her cane. Her presence silenced the argument like a switch had been flipped. "Young man," she said, her voice calm but commanding, "your friend speaks truth, but he also underestimates the depth of what is coming. If you stand idle, this colony will tear itself apart. If you act, you may yet save it." Marco stared at her, then at Evan. "What is she talking about?" Evan hesitated. Then he told him about the cut supports, the sabotage, the whispers. Marco's face darkened. "You're saying someone's engineering this? Trying to start a war between us and them?" Sailari nodded gravely. "And they are close to succeeding." A sudden vibration shook the room. The lights flickered, plunging them into momentary darkness. A muffled boom reverberated through the walls. Evan's heart lurched. "What was that?" Marco cursed, already reaching for his comm. "Explosion near the oxygen pumps. Section 3 just went dark." Salari's glow dimmed. her face etched with sorrow. It has begun. The air in Section 3 was heavy with smoke and panic. Emergency klaxons wailed, their shrill cries bouncing off the curved metal walls of the asteroid colony. Evan's lungs burned as he stumbled over shattered support beams, searching for survivors. "Over here!" Marco's voice cut through the chaos. The big man was crouched beside a collapsed walkway, his muscles straining as he lifted a jagged piece of alloy. Beneath it, a young human miner gasped for breath, his leg pinned at an unnatural angle. Evan dropped beside him, ignoring the pain in his own shoulder where a beam had grazed him earlier. He jammed his pry bar into the debris and heaved. Together, he and Marco freed the miner, who cried out as his leg shifted. "We need medics!" Evan shouted, his throat raw from the acrid air. Olyari healers swept forward, their tendrils glowing faintly as they wrapped the injured man in soothing energy. But the moment was broken by a human voice shouting from the crowd, "Don't touch him! Get away from our people!" The healer recoiled, her filaments dimming. Evan rounded on the heckler, fury rising in his chest. "They're saving lives!" he barked. "You'd rather he die than accept help?" The man shrank back, but didn't apologize. Fear made people irrational, and Evan could feel that fear crawling through the section like a living thing. The oxygen alarms blared next, adding another layer of dread. Evan froze. The explosion had damaged more than the supports. Part of the life support grid had been compromised. Already the air felt thinner. Marco swore. "If we don't seal this off, we're all gonna choke." "SEAL team!" Evan shouted instinctively, his mechanics training taking over. "We need panels over that breach, now!" To his surprise, both humans and Olyari moved. For a moment, the division between them blurred as survival demanded cooperation. Evan found himself barking orders, directing teams to drag sheet metal into place, welding makeshift barriers, and rerouting power lines. Sweat streamed down his face, mixing with grime and blood, but he didn't stop. In that frantic half hour, Evan felt something strange. People were listening to him. Later, when the immediate danger had passed and the wounded had been carried out, the survivors gathered in the mess hall. The place reeked of fear, sweat, and recycled air. Angry voices clashed like metal on metal. "They're behind this," a human miner shouted, pointing at a group of Olyari clustered by the wall. "The explosion happened on their shift." "Lies!" an Olyari woman hissed, her filaments flaring in agitation. "Why would we sabotage the very air we breathe?" "It is your corporations that profit from chaos." The two sides surged toward each other, fists clenched. Marco moved to intervene, but it was Selari who stepped into the center. The elderly Olyari's presence was unexpected but commanding. Her cane tapped once on the floor, sharp as a gunshot. "Enough," she said, her voice carrying an ancient weight. The hall fell into uneasy silence. Silari's silver-white eyes swept the room. "While you bicker, more of our children lie bleeding in the rubble. Do you not see? Someone wants this division. Someone profits from it. And you are giving them what they desire." A murmur rippled through the crowd, but then a human spat on the floor. "Easy for you to preach, alien. Maybe you planned it." Evan's fists clenched. He stepped forward, his voice cracking with raw emotion. "She saved me when she didn't have to. She doesn't owe us anything, but she's here, risking her life just like the rest of us. You want to blame someone? Fine, but don't blame the ones pulling people out of the fire with their bare hands." The man glared, but this time the crowd didn't rally behind him. Evan felt dozens of eyes turned toward him. Some hostile, some questioning, some filled with a fragile kind of hope. When the meeting finally dispersed, Evan found himself alone with Sailari and Marco in a quiet maintenance corridor. "You've got a voice, kid," Marco muttered, leaning against the wall. "Didn't think you had it in you." "I didn't either," Evan admitted. His hands trembled as the adrenaline wore off. "I was just angry." "That anger saved lives," Sailari said softly. Her tendrils brushed his shoulder, not in healing, but in comfort. Evan studied her, curiosity gnawing at him. "How did you know about the sabotage?" "Before it happened." For a moment, her gaze drifted, as if she were seeing beyond the metal walls to something far older. "I have lived long enough to recognize patterns. Shadows repeating themselves." "That's not an answer," Marco grunted. Sailari's lips curved in a sad smile. "Some truths must be earned, not handed over. But know this, the explosion was not the end. It was only the opening move. Sleep didn't come easily for Evan that night. He lay in his bunk, staring at the ceiling, while fragments of memory clawed at him. He remembered being 12 years old, standing in a collapsed mining shaft, screaming for his father. The air had tasted just like it did today, thin, metallic, filled with dust. Humans had dug from one side, Olyari from the other, but they hadn't coordinated. By the time they broke through, it was too late. Evan had promised himself never to be part of this cursed cycle of distrust. Yet here he was, repeating it. And then his mind replayed the market, Sailari falling, his hands bandaging her wound. That single moment had set everything in motion. If he hadn't helped her, would any of this have happened? His comm beeped, shattering his thoughts. A message blinked across the screen. "We see you. Choose your side, or you'll be buried with the rest. No sender. No trace. Just a threat hanging in the stale air of the bunk room." Evan sat up, heart hammering. Whoever was behind this, they weren't done, and he was already marked. The next morning, Evan returned to the ruins of Section 3 with Marco and Sailari. The rubble had been partially cleared, revealing twisted supports and scorched machinery. Evan crouched near a melted pipe, frowning. Something glinted beneath the soot. Carefully, he pried it free, a small black device no bigger than his palm, half melted but still recognizable. "What the hell is that?" Marco asked. Evan turned it over. It wasn't standard mining equipment. The casing bore strange etchings, nothing human-made. He looked up, meeting Sailari's gaze. Her face had gone pale. "You know what this is," Evan said quietly. Her tendrils quivered. "I prayed I would never see one again." "It is a shard, a tool of those who wish for war." Marco swore under his breath. "So it really is sabotage." Evan's grip tightened on the shard. The weight of it felt heavier than metal. He could feel the conspiracy pressing down on them all. Sailari's voice lowered to a whisper. "The darkness has returned. And now, Evan, you are caught in its web." Evan looked out over the ruined section, the smoke still curling into the air. He wasn't a leader, not a soldier, not even a miner anymore. But the colony was teetering on the edge of collapse, and somehow, impossibly, everyone was looking to him. And the shadows were only growing deeper. The colony didn't sleep after the explosion. Not really. Life went on. Air recyclers hummed, the hydroponics bays still glowed green, shuttles still docked and undocked, but an invisible tension coiled through every corridor. Conversations grew hushed, sideways glances lasted too long, and the line between us and them became sharper with every passing hour. Evan felt it in his bones as he walked the main transit corridor the next day. He passed two human miners whispering to each other, their eyes cutting toward a group of Olyari technicians ahead. When the aliens turned a corner, the whispers became curses. Parasites. Bet they planted that bomb themselves. Evan stopped, the words burning in his ears. He wanted to shout at them, but he knew shouting wouldn't change their minds. Not anymore. He kept walking, though his fists clenched tight at his sides. Tight. In the command hub, the chaos was worse. Screens flickered with damage reports. Crew shuffled through data pads. Voices overlapped in a storm of arguments. Captain Juno Vey, the colony's grim human overseer, stood at the center of the storm. Her uniform was immaculate, her hair tied back so tight it looked painful, but her eyes were ringed with exhaustion. "We can't keep patching sections with scrap," she snapped at an engineer. "I want stability reports, not excuses." Silari stood near the far wall, her cane resting against her shoulder, her expression unreadable. Evan found himself drifting toward her like a ship pulled by gravity. "What's happening?" he asked quietly. "Politics," she murmured, "and fear. A dangerous combination." On cue, one of the human officers jabbed a finger toward the Olyari delegation. "You're hiding something. That explosion had your tech written all over it." The Olyari delegate bristled. "Absurd! We lost people too. Do you think we enjoy breathing smoke and burying our kin?" The room teetered on the edge of another shouting match when Captain Vey slammed her hand on the table. "Enough!" Her voice cracked like a whip. "Until I have proof, I will not hear another baseless accusation. We work together or we all die together. That is the only truth that matters." Evan admired her strength, but he could see it in her eyes. She was holding the colony together with sheer force of will, and the cracks were spreading faster than she could patch them. That night, Evan, Marco, and Sayalari gathered in a maintenance tunnel far from prying eyes. The shard lay on the floor between them, its strange markings faintly pulsing, as if alive. Marco scowled at it. "Still gives me the creeps. Like it's watching me." "It isn't," Sayalari said softly, "but it was made to mimic life, to burrow into systems, to whisper destruction." Evan rubbed his temple. "So someone planted this. Someone who knew exactly where to hit, not someone," Sayalari corrected. "Some organization. These shards are not crafted by scavengers or pirates. They belong to the architects of silence." The name sent a chill through the tunnel. Evan frowned. "Never heard of them." "Few have," Sayalari said. Her tendrils dimmed, her voice heavy with memory. "They thrive in secrecy. They sow conflict between species, then feed on the aftermath, resources, contracts, slaves. They profit from war, always hidden in the shadows." Marco spat on the ground. "So what? You're saying we've got ghosts running around the colony?" "Not ghosts." Puppeteer's Evan picked up the shard, its surface warm against his skin. "If they're pulling strings, then people are already dancing to their tune." "That explains the threats I got." Both Sayalari and Marco turned sharply. "Threats," they said in unison. Evan hesitated, then told them about the anonymous message. "We see you. Choose your side or you'll be buried with the rest." Sayalari's face tightened with worry. "Then they've marked you, Evan." "Which means—" She hesitated. "Which means you are more dangerous to them alive than dead. For now." Marco chuckled grimly. Comfort and thought. Over the next days, Evan's life became a blur of repairs, arguments, and suspicion. He patched hulls, rewired circuits, and helped Olyari engineers stabilize failing systems. Yet everywhere he went, eyes followed him, some with gratitude, others with resentment. At the hydroponics bay, an Olyari child pressed a flower into his hand, whispering thanks for saving her uncle. Moments later, a human worker muttered, "Traitor," loud enough for him to hear. The colony was splitting in two, and Evan felt himself walking the razor edge between both worlds. The breaking point came in Docking Bay 7. A human supply shuttle had just arrived, bringing crates of food, medicine, and oxygen filters. But as the cargo was unloaded, a shouting match erupted between the human dock crew and the Ulyari quartermasters. "This shipment's ours," the humans insisted. "We're the majority here. We get first claim." "The filters are needed in our quarter," the Olyari countered. "Without them, our children choke while yours breathe easy." Evan arrived just as fists started flying. Marco barreled into the fray, hauling two men apart. "Break it up!" he roared. But the crowd didn't listen. A crate toppled, spilling filters across the floor. A human worker grabbed one, shoving an Olyari back with a curse. Evan acted on instinct. He jumped onto the nearest crate and shouted, his voice cracking like thunder, "Stop!" The word hung in the air. The fighting froze, if only out of shock. Dozens of eyes turned toward him. Evan's heart pounded, but he forced the words out. "Every filter, every crate, every drop of oxygen, none of it matters if we tear each other apart. You think the explosion was an accident? It wasn't. Someone wants this. They want us at each other's throats. And right now, you're giving them exactly what they want." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Some scowled, others looked away in shame. Marco backed him up, his voice booming. "He's right. You fight, we all lose. End of story." Slowly, grudgingly, the tension bled from the bay. The crates were divided fairly under Captain Vey's orders, though resentment lingered like smoke. As the crowd dispersed, Sailari appeared beside Evan. "You are becoming what this colony needs," she said softly. Evan laughed bitterly. "A scapegoat?" Her silver eyes met his. "A voice." Later that evening, Evan stood on the observation deck, staring out at the stars. The asteroid colony drifted in silence, a fragile bubble of life in an endless void. He thought about his father, about the cave-in years ago, about the endless cycle of mistrust. He thought about Sailari's words, patterns repeating themselves. And he thought about the shard locked away in the captain's vault, waiting. Marco joined him, arms folded. "You ever feel like we're just patching leaks on a ship that's already sinking?" "Every day," Evan admitted. "Then why keep at it?" Evan didn't answer right away. He pressed the Olyari child's flower between his fingers, fragile and real. Finally, he said, "Because someone has to." Marco grinned crookedly. "Guess that someone's you, huh?" Before Evan could reply, the comm system crackled. A chilling voice filled the observation deck. "Citizens of Veyron Asteroid Colony, this is your warning. Choose loyalty or face annihilation. The architects are watching." The transmission ended, leaving only the hiss of static. Evan's blood ran cold. For the first time, the shadows had spoken openly. And now, the real war was beginning. The next 48 hours were a blur of whispers and fire. The architect's broadcast hadn't just unsettled the colony. It had split it open. Everywhere Evan went, the air vibrated with rumor. Some claimed the Olyari were spies working with the architects. Others swore it was the human corporations staging a false flag. And through it all, the shard's memory pulsed at the back of Evan's mind like a heartbeat. he couldn't shake. He barely slept. Every corridor he walked carried the same echo. Choose your side or be buried with the rest. The first riot broke out in Section 5. Evan and Marco arrived too late to stop the spark. By the time they pushed through the crowd, chaos was already burning. Humans and Oliari clashed in the narrow walkways, fists, blades, and makeshift weapons flying. A food storage crate had been overturned, rations spilling across the floor like spilled blood. "Back off!" Marco bellowed, shoving two men apart. He caught a punch meant for an Oliari, twisted the attacker's arm, and hurled him against a wall. Evan's voice cracked as he shouted, "Stop fighting! Don't you see what's happening? You're doing the architect's work for them." No one listened. The roar of fear and fury drowned him out. An Oliari child screamed as she was shoved to the ground, trampled by boots. Evan lunged forward, scooping her up before she could be crushed. He cradled her against his chest, heart hammering. That moment, her tiny hands clutching his shirt, broke something inside him. He climbed onto a crate and bellowed with every ounce of his strength, "If you want war, keep fighting. If you want to live, look at her." The hall froze. Dozens of eyes turned to the child trembling in his arms. "She doesn't care if we're human or Oliari," Evan said, his voice ragged but fierce. "She just wants to breathe, to eat, to survive. That's all any of us want. The architects don't care who wins. They just want corpses. Is that what you'll give them?" Silence. Heavy. Shameful. Slowly, weapons lowered. Breathing steadied. A few humans helped Oliari back to their feet. A few Oliari handed rations back to the humans. Marco exhaled hard, his broad shoulders sagging. "Nice speech, kid." Evan handed the child to her mother, who bowed in gratitude. But deep inside, he knew this was only a reprieve. Riots were like fire, put one out, and another sparked somewhere else. Later, in the command hub, Captain Vey was pale with exhaustion. Her officers barked updates. Section 7 on lockdown, a hydroponics bay sabotaged, rumors of weapons caches spreading. "This colony is turning into a battlefield," she muttered. Her eyes met Evan's. "And somehow people are listening to you more than to me." Evan blinked. "I'm just a mechanic." "Not anymore." Vey's voice hardened. "The architects marked you, and now you've become a symbol whether you like it or not. That makes you dangerous. To them and to us." Evan swallowed. "So, what are you saying?" "I'm saying you'd better decide what you're going to do with that voice before it tears this colony apart." That night, Evan met Sailari in the shadowed gardens of the Oliari Quarter. Bioluminescent plants glowed faintly, casting eerie blue light over her ancient features. "You carry a burden heavier than you realize," she said softly. Evan sat heavily on a bench, rubbing his eyes. "I never asked for it." "Burden rarely asks permission." He looked at her, frustration bleeding into his voice. "Why me?" "I'm no leader. I'm no soldier. I'm nobody." Sailari tilted her head. "And yet, when the fire came, you carried a child to safety. You shouted for peace when others shouted for blood. That is not nobody, Evan. That is the very essence of leadership." Her words cut deep. He wanted to deny them, to shove the responsibility away. But the image of the little girl clinging to him would not leave his mind. Sailari's silver eyes softened. "The architects will not stop. They are testing us, probing for weakness. And you are a threat they did not foresee. That is why they whisper your name now." Evan's breath caught. "They... what?" She touched his chest gently. "In Oliari tongue, their message twists your name. Evan, the Breaker. the one who disrupts their design. The weight of it pressed on him like a mountain. The next day, Marco dragged Evan to the underground tavern, a place thick with smoke, sweat, and fear. If you're going to keep talking like a leader, people need to see your face, Marco muttered. Not just humans. Everyone. Sure enough, the tavern was packed. Miners, engineers, healers, smugglers, both human and Olyari. Conversations died when Evan entered. All eyes followed him. A grizzled miner spoke first. "You really believe we can stand against the architects?" Evan hesitated, then said, "I don't know if we can, but I know we'll definitely lose if we fight each other." A ripple of voices surged: agreement, skepticism, anger. Someone slammed a fist on the table. "Words don't stop bombs." Evan raised his hands. "You're right, but words can stop us from being the bomb. That's what they want, for us to blow ourselves apart from the inside." Another voice, sharper from the corner. "Easy for you to say. You're human. You'll always side with your own." Evan turned toward the speaker, an Olyari mechanic with scars down her face. "I sided with Celari when she was bleeding in the market. I sided with an Olyari child when she was about to be crushed. I don't care about sides. I care about survival." The silence after that was heavier than any argument. For the first time, Evan saw something shift in the room. Not unity, not yet, but the faintest spark of possibility. But the architects weren't idle. Hours later, alarms blared through the colony. A gas line in Section 9 had ruptured, explosion imminent. Evan, Marco, and Sailari sprinted through choking smoke, their lungs burning. Flames licked the walls, heat blistering their skin. Evan reached the control valve, his hands shaking as he tried to force it shut. The wheel groaned, stuck. He gritted his teeth, muscles screaming. Marco grabbed the wheel beside him, adding his strength. Slowly, agonizingly, the valve turned. The hiss of gas died. The fire dimmed. But behind them, a figure slipped into the smoke. Evan caught only a glimpse, a dark silhouette, a mask with a symbol etched into it, a circle unbroken by jagged lines, the mark of the architects. Before he could react, the figure vanished. Evan staggered back, coughing, heart hammering. "They're here!" On the colony. Not just pulling strings from the shadows. They're walking among us. Celari's face was grim. Then the final act has begun. That night, as Evan lay awake, another message flickered across his comm. "You speak too loudly. Breaker or not, you will be silenced." His hands trembled as he stared at the words. The colony was a tinderbox, and now he was the spark everyone was watching. The colony woke to fire. At first, it was just alarms, blaring through the corridors like a chorus of screams. Then came the smell, smoke, and burning metal. By the time Evan tore from his bunk half-dressed, the intercom was spitting chaos. "Section 12, breach detected. Explosions in hydroponics. Multiple fires across the docking bays." It wasn't sabotage anymore. It was war. Evan sprinted toward the command hub, Marco at his side, both of them shoving through panicked civilians. Mothers clutched children. Miners carried makeshift weapons. Olyari healers wrapped their tendrils around the wounded, pulling them to safety. The colony was tearing itself apart. Captain Vey was already barking orders when Evan burst into the hub. Her hair hung loose around her face, her uniform scorched. "They're everywhere," she spat. "Cells in every section, hitting us all at once." "Architects?" Evan asked. She gave a grim nod. "And collaborators." Some of our own, the words hit like a gut punch. Humans and Olyari both had traitors in their ranks. puppets dancing to the architect's tune. Sailari stood in the corner, silent, her cane planted firmly on the floor. Her silver eyes glimmered, reflecting the chaos on the monitors. Evan approached her. "You knew this was coming." "I feared it," she admitted. "But the scale, even I underestimated their hunger." Evan's fists clenched. "Then how do we stop them?" She met his gaze steadily. "By breaking their design, by refusing the choice they force upon us." The hub shook, an explosion rocking through the asteroid. Sirens wailed, lights flickered. "We're losing Docking Bay 3!" an officer cried. Marco swore. "If they take the docks, we're trapped rats." Evan didn't hesitate. "Then we take it back." The battle for Docking Bay 3 was hell. The architect's agents were no longer shadows. Masked figures surged through the smoke, wielding alien rifles that spat blue fire. They moved with precision, cutting down anyone who resisted. But Evan and Marco led the charge. Humans with mining drills, Olyari with plasma cutters, they stormed the bay together, a ragtag militia bound by desperation. "Push them back!" Evan shouted, ducking behind a crate as plasma bolts scorched the air. His heart hammered, but his voice carried like a beacon. An Olyari healer was hit, collapsing with a scream. Without thinking, Evan ran to her, dragging her behind cover. A human miner saw it, then another. Slowly, the fear began to shift. For once, they weren't seeing species. They were seeing allies. Marco ripped a mounted drill from its stand and swung it like a weapon, smashing into an architect agent. "Come on, you bastards!" he roared. The dock echoed with screams, gunfire, the hiss of burning metal. And slowly, inch by inch, the colonists pushed the architects back. In the aftermath, Docking Bay 3 was a graveyard. Bodies sprawled across the floor, human and Olyari alike. But the enemy had retreated, their masks vanishing into the shadows. Evan leaned against a wall, chest heaving. His clothes were scorched, his arms trembling. Sailari appeared beside him, unshaken despite her years. She studied the survivors patching each other's wounds, humans and Olyari working side by side. "You see," she said quietly, "you are the breaker." "You shattered the wall between them, if only for a moment," Evan swallowed hard. "Then why does it feel like I'm just gluing the pieces back together while everything burns?" Because unity is not born in comfort, it is forged in fire. But the architects weren't finished. That night, another message echoed through the colony's systems. The same cold, mechanical voice. "Breaker, you think you lead them, but you only delay the inevitable. Your colony will fall, your people will die, and your name will vanish into silence." Evan stared at the speakers, fists shaking. "Come and try." The final assault came 3 days later. The architects struck at the core, the reactor that powered everything. If it went, the colony would tear itself apart in a catastrophic implosion. Evan, Marco, and Sailari led the charge into the reactor chamber. The air was hot, vibrating with the hum of unstable energy. Masked agents swarmed the catwalks, planting charges, firing down at defenders. Evan fought like a man possessed. He ripped a rifle from a fallen agent, firing blindly, shouting orders, dragging the wounded to safety. Marco smashed through enemies with his bare fists. Sailari wielded her cane like a blade, her tendrils glowing as she unleashed bursts of energy. But the architects had numbers and cunning. At the far end of the chamber, a figure stepped forward. Taller than the others, draped in a cloak of shifting black. Its mask was etched with deeper symbols, pulsing with alien light. "You are the breaker," the figure said, voice echoing through the chamber. The anomaly we did not account for. That ends tonight. Evan raised his rifle. Funny, people keep telling me I'm nobody. The leader raised a hand, and the reactor screamed, energy surging dangerously. Lights flickered, the chamber shaking. They'll die, the figure hissed. All of them. Unless you yield, Evan's blood ran cold. This was the choice. His life or the colony's, the very trap the architects wanted. But Sailari's words echoed in his mind. Refuse the choice. He lowered his rifle, voice steady. No, I won't choose. We all fight or none of us does. He turned, shouting to the colonists behind him. You hear me? Humans, Oliari, this is it. We fight as one or we burn as dust. A roar answered him. Miners, healers, engineers, they surged forward together. Plasma fire met drills and cutters, fists and fury. The chamber erupted in chaos. Evan charged with them, colliding with the cloaked leader. The two grappled on the catwalk, blows raining, sparks flying from the unstable reactor. You cannot stop us, the leader hissed. Watch me, Evan growled. With a final heave, he hurled the figure into the reactor's containment shield. There was a blinding flash, a scream, and then silence. The leader was gone. The reactor stabilized. The remaining agents fled into the void. The colony stood, barely. Days later, the fires were out. The wounded were healing. Humans and Oliari worked side by side to rebuild, their hands raw but determined. The scars would remain, but so would the bond forged in fire. Evan stood on the observation deck, staring at the stars. Marco joined him, bruised but grinning. Never thought I'd see the day people stop calling me a brawler and start calling me a hero. Evan laughed softly. You earned it. Sailari appeared behind them, her cane tapping gently. So did you, Breaker. Evan shook his head. Don't call me that. I didn't break anything. I just tried to keep us alive. Sailari's silver eyes softened. Exactly. You broke the architect's design, and in its place you forged something new. Evan looked out at the stars again. The war wasn't over, not really. The architects would return. But for now, the colony had survived. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough.